Today, we are going to build a D&D character who is probably going to end up being the most powerful character I've made to date. Do they tank? Nope. Heal? Deal 5 billion damage per round? Wrong again. Instead, they have more capacity to just lock down the entire battlefield than anything I have ever seen. And I'm super excited to share it with you. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, most weeks, I take deep dives into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about these builds. I like to theory craft, not so that I can tell you like the right or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that is both fun but also powerful to play. So if you also love creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just are really into theory crafting, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you are thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm really glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name's Colby. So when the Heroes of Faerun book came out a few months ago, as of this recording, there were a lot of shiny new spells for the spellcasters of the world to play with. Hooray. In general, I think most of the spells in that book are pretty decent. There are some duds in there for sure, but there are plenty of just kind of solid, pretty good, decent options, right? In my opinion, though, there is one that stands head and shoulders above the rest for pure, unadulterated power. And that is Selune's Viper. I don't know that I would argue that the spell is overpowered necessarily, but if it's not, it's very, very close. What makes it so good, you might be asking? A couple of things, actually. First off, it gives you some temporary hit points, that's nice, and more importantly, can potentially incapacitate an enemy every single round. That's also nice, but not particularly unique among control spells, right? What is unique about it, though, is that it incapacitates enemies so long as you simply land an attack on them that happens to deal a little damage. That is, the enemies don't get to make a saving throw to avoid being incapacitated. If the attack hits, they are unable to take actions, bonus actions, or reactions, period. Legendary saves, not going to help them. What really takes the spell to the next level, though, is the fact that the spell lasts for an hour but doesn't require concentration. And using the spell to lock an enemy down every round is something that you do with your action, but it doesn't require you to, cast the spell every turn or anything, meaning that if you had a way to do it, you could potentially be casting spells on your turn 2 for additional control. You could be using your concentration for control, using your bonus action, etc. Altogether, then, this allows for a ton of potential shutdown power. Now, there are some potential drawbacks to the spell. If you run out of temporary hit points, the spell ends. Perhaps more troublingly, if the enemy is immune to the poisoned condition, then it's not going to work, and that is a potential big drawback, since so many enemies are immune to the poisoned condition. But honestly, it's only about 20% of the monsters in the 5.5 monster manual that are immune to poison, right? That's a big chunk, no doubt, but it also means that this should work fine on 80% of what you end up fighting, right? The vast majority. Anyways, since the moment I read the description, I thought, yeah, I'm gonna need to build around this spell one day. And today is the day I finally make good on that desire. You know, as much as I love to build characters focused on damage on this channel, I have long said that control is really the most powerful thing that you can do in combat, right? As long as it's not like everyone is built just to control, of course. I mean, somebody's got to do damage. We can't all just be hypnotizing everybody. Okay, fine, I'll take one for the team and play a murder hobo with my arm. But yeah, I think the strongest characters I've ever built are ones that have the greatest potential to just shut down the battlefield. The Clockwork Controller, for example. And yeah, in that tradition, with the help of this new spell and a little bit of multiclassing, okay, fine, quite a bit of multiclassing, come on, it's me we're talking about. I think today we can build a better controller than we have ever seen in D&D 5e or 5.5, and I think it will be an absolute blast to play. So let's dive into it, shall we? I proudly present D&D build number 253, the Ultimate Controller, the Abjailer, the Snake Charmer, the Anacontrolda, The Toxic Controller, When Selune Dances, Medusa's Grasp, the Boa Constrictor, the Boa Restrictor, the Incapacitanker, When Saloon Hits Your Eye. Oh, thanks as always to the fantastic suggestions from Discord this week. But as a child of the 80s, I knew it was over when I saw the one from Tinlar this week, Cobra Commander. Oh yeah, that's perfect, as you'll see. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build this week. Yeah, I love the way that like the magic spell kind of turns into the Viper here, that Cobra. So cool. If you'd be interested in checking out the other stuff that Randall does and or potentially reaching out to try and commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I will put links in the video description as always on how to do so. But first, I am really excited, you guys, to have the best convention this side of the Mississippi for a sponsor again today, Phoenix Fan Fusion. This incredible con is going on in Phoenix, Arizona from June 5th to the 7th, and you should totally get out here for it. We're talking 3 days of gaming, cosplay, comics, and sweet geeky fun. For those who are not in the know, this con is huge. Over 130,000 people attended last year, and I know it's going to be even bigger this year because they are adding some really great stuff. There's Game Tabletopia, where you can get on your tabletop gaming, definitely the highlight for me of this con, no question. But there's also an Arcade Oasis. Totally going to be showing off my Street Fighter 2 chops there. I'll take any of you. My Ryu is flawless. There are, of course, cosplay contests, and don't forget, kids 12 and under attend for free, for reals. If you haven't tried it, nothing better than taking your kid or a niece or a nephew to a fantastic con. Okay, so passes for Fan Fusion, they're already on sale. I have a link in the video description and pinned comment that will take you to their site so that you can check it out and get your passes. I would love it if you would use that link so that they know I sent you. So yeah, don't delay. Get out to Phoenix Fan Fusion this summer. Bring your family, bring your friends, or hey, come alone and make new friends while you're there. Huge thanks to Fan Fusion. I know it's going to be an incredible event this year. All right. Let's get back to the build. Okay, at level 1 for our starting class for this spellcasting controller. We're not starting fighter. That would be ridiculous. We're starting artificer. It turns out not all of my wizards are level 1 fighters. Some of them just happen to be artificers. Hey, if you'd like to get this shirt for yourself, check out the link to my merch store in the video description. See what else is available. I bet you find something you like. But yes, Artificer is such a great level 1 dip for casters for 3 reasons. 1, they get Constitution saving throw proficiency, helping out our concentration checks, right? 2, they get medium armor and shield proficiency, giving a massive bump to our survivability. And while every character cares a lot about survivability, of course, we might care about it a little bit more than most, even since, like I said in the intro, our main tactic, using Salune's Viper, right, is going to depend on us holding on to the temporary hit points that it grants, yeah? So yeah, bumping that AC is paramount. But then 3, going Artificer doesn't slow down our spell slot progression. Remember, when you multiclass with half casters, including Pallies and Rangers now in 5.5, you combine the levels you have in half caster, divided by 2 but rounded up, with the levels you have in full caster to determine how many and what level of spell slots you have, right? Meaning that taking just 1 level of Artificer isn't going to slow down our spell slot progression at all. It's essentially like taking 1 level of a full caster, right? And that's kind of huge, especially for us, since I think we are potentially going to be burning through those spell slots at an alarming rate, as we will see. For our species, you know what? I'm kind of feeling like PYF here, honestly. Pick your favorite. Anything is going to work, but I do have some recommendations. First up, if at all possible, the best pick here probably would be the Mark of Warding Dwarf. For one main reason, they get access to the Armor of Agathis spell. Problem is, from what I can tell, most tables don't allow these like Mark of X species unless you're playing in an Eberron campaign specifically, right? If your DM allows it, or if you're playing in an Eberron campaign, that's the route that I would go, 100%. I'm not, however, going to assume that you can do that. And so alternative suggestions would be any species with flight, you know, Aarakocra, Dragonborn, Aasimar, Owlin, etc. Mainly because it'll be that much easier if we can fly for us to stay safe and not get hit, right? Human is always great for an extra origin feat. Shadar Kai would be wonderful for a little extra mobility and damage resistance. Warforged would get us a nice AC bump. So yeah, those would all be like at the top of my list, I think. But again, you can make anything work. Oh, and for those who are also thinking that the Levistus Tiefling would work here because it gets access to the Armor of Agathis spell too, the problem is that the Levistus Tiefling, unlike the Mark of Warding Dwarf, is officially listed now as a legacy species option. That is, since Tieflings were updated in the new player's handbook, you're not supposed to be able to use the Levistus Tiefling if you're playing with the 2024 rules, right? Mark of Warding Dwarves, not the case. Same with any of those Mark of X species. I assume because they were meant to be Eberron specific. I don't know, but yeah, talk with your DM about either of them, I guess. As for our background, as always, I say, take an old one and customize it, or make a custom background if you can, but if you can't, Acolyte is going to work just fine since it gives the origin feat and the ability score increases that we want. As for that origin feat, I want to grab Magic Initiate Cleric here, which lets us pick 2 cleric cantrips and a first level cleric spell to cast once per day for free, and then more if we have spell slots to spend. What spell are we wanting to pick here? Command, obviously. Now, I got a lot of flack in my tier ranking every class video, right up there if you missed it, for not giving clerics a higher score for control than I did. And the biggest reason most people pointed to was this spell. To be fair, those naysayers, including Chris, right, Treant Monk, they have a point. Command is a good spell. Personally, I think it's good, not great, when it comes to control, but let's discuss. It's generally only available to paladins, bards, and clerics, hence the origin feat. You cast it as an action, right, at a single target, and then if they fail their wisdom save against it, you can command them to approach, drop, grovel, halt, or flee. Generally, flee is considered to be the strongest option here, since if the enemy is melee at least, they not only lose this turn by spending it running away from you, but potentially the next one as well, as they're going to have to spend that turn trying to get back in range to do anything useful, right? The other nice thing about the spell is that you can upcast it to affect more targets, potentially shutting down multiple enemies for 2 rounds if they're melee with this single spell makes it solid. What I don't love about it is that it requires you to use your action and a spell slot every single time you want to get some control out of it, right? Compared to, say, something like Web, or better yet, Hypnotic Pattern, Fear, etc., where you're casting it once and potentially impacting multiple enemies for multiple rounds without needing to reapply it or anything, so you can focus on doing other stuff with your actions and your spell slots. As a result, I think Command is generally weaker than a lot of these other control spells. Now, sure, Command doesn't require your concentration, so that's nice. And, maybe it's not very fair to compare a first level spell to a second or a third level one, but fine. If we're just casting it at first level and only affecting one target, Sleep and Tasha's Hideous Laughter can potentially shut down a single enemy for longer than Command without needing to spend more slots and actions, right? Yes, those do require concentration, and so for that reason, the place where Command can really shine, in my opinion, is when you can couple it with a really solid concentration-based control spell, or a spell like Selune's Viper, or, in our case, maybe both, eventually, at least. So, yeah, I do want to have it for the build today. And sure, maybe when I get to tier ranking the cleric subclasses video sometime in the next couple of months, I might amend my initial cleric ranking and give them a little bump to their control, but I don't think it's going to be a big bump. I need to allow you to continue complaining. Okay, let's move on to our ability scores. I assume we go the point buy method as always and say, let's take a 15 in intelligence and a +2 there, a 14 constitution, a 14 dexterity, and then a 12 charisma, but +1 there. Because we're going to need that 13 charisma for multiclassing. As for starting equipment, we just need to grab some scale mail and a shield. No weapon needed on our build today, unless you maybe wanted to grab a simple melee weapon to use with True Strike when you're not using your action for control and an enemy gets up in your face, right? But then, yes, as an Artificer 1, we get Tinker's Magic, which is a nice bit of utility, letting us intelligence modifier times per day, use an action to create basically a piece of mundane adventuring gear, which can often come in handy. And then we get Artificer spells. I'd probably grab Guidance as a cantrip if you didn't get it from the origin feat anyways. And then an offensive cantrip like Firebolt or True Strike maybe both, one for range and one for melee. And then I'd be sure to get Cure Wounds, giving us a nice heal option that we typically wouldn't have on this build, which I really love, actually. Hooray for backup support and versatility. And Cure Wounds is a really good spell now. And then I probably want Fairy Fire here. It requires concentration and potentially grants advantage on all attacks against multiple enemies if they fail their save against it, right? And yeah, advantage is something that we definitely want to have on this build. More on that later. You know what I would definitely love to have? A big slumber party with my channel members and patrons. Why do I always have to make it weird? Tickle fight. Let me give a quick shout out to those members and patrons. You guys, thank you so much for your support. It means so much to me. It really does. I could not do this for a living without you. And I'm very, very grateful. So thanks. If you're not a member or a patron, I'd love it if you'd consider becoming one. There is a button right below that says join, or if you look in the video description, you will see a link to my Patreon, and there you can learn about all of the perks that I offer to my members and patrons, including access to the library of write-ups that I make for each of these builds so that you can more easily recreate them yourself, a little cheat sheet, right? Access to the community Discord server, and access to the live monthly Q&A hangouts that we have, which I'm doing tomorrow. Super excited. Love those. Anyways, I offer all of my perks to all of my members and patrons that sign up just at the silver level or higher. It's like $2 a month. And then I just ask that you pay what you think it's worth and what you feel you can afford. But if you can't or don't want to support the channel in that way, you know, I'm glad that you're here regardless. Watching, liking, subscribing, these are also great ways to support the channel. So thanks. Really. All right, at level 2, with our defenses shored up, yes, it is time to get into our main class for the build, and you know what it is, don't you? I gotta be a wizard. Everybody knows they're the best controllers, with maybe one or two subclass exceptions otherwise, but yeah, best spell list, all the best spells for control, including Sulune's Viper, which is only available to druids and wizards, in case you didn't know, and Cheaty McCheaterface bards, as always. So yeah, I think our champion probably started out with like a knack, you know? This ability to not only make things with their hands, mundane things, clockwork things, but also this inexplicable ability to make things with magic. Maybe they discovered this skill accidentally. Maybe it was intentional, and they studied it out and practiced it until they could make a crowbar appear out of thin air or from a simple lump of metal. But instead of being satisfied with that little bit of magical ability, they craved more. And so they began to deepen their studies, further delving into secret tomes or taking lessons at the nearby academy or from the crazy hermit who lived in the swamp. Whatever your reason, yes, we are going wizard now, meaning that we would be a wizard 1, and as such, we get a ritual adept first up, such a great feature, letting us just cast any ritual spell from our spell book without needing to have it prepared, so stock up on all that utility. We also get Arcane Recovery, which lets us recover spent spell slots equal to half our wizard level rounded down once per day after a short rest. And then, yes, of course, we get first level wizard spells and cantrips. I think I'd probably grab Blade Ward here for a nice concentration-based cantrip that makes us harder to hit. And you'll for sure want to grab Shield and Absorb Elements to help out with our survivability, you know, using a reaction to either increase your AC by 5 with Shield or give you resistance to elemental damage with Absorb Elements, yeah. Sleep and Tasha's Hideous Laughter are great single target control options, as we've mentioned. Sleep might potentially hit more enemies, I guess, if they're standing close together, right? But then the other one I'd want to prioritize here would actually be False Life. I don't talk about this spell much, but it's pretty solid. It's an action to cast and then simply gives us 2d4 plus 4 temporary hit points, which will be especially valuable for us. More on that later. It upcasts nicely too, 5 more temporary hit points for every level we upcast it. And then finally, I would be sure to grab my old standby here, Find Familiar, as well, since that would let us summon a friendly little owl who could hopefully take the help action and then fly away safely, right, since they have flyby, getting us advantage on our first attack against an enemy, which will be really important for our control, yeah, since we gotta hit them with Sulune's Viper. At level 3, we would be a wizard 2, and that means we get the Scholar feature, and that's all we get at this level. It gives us expertise in one of our intelligence skills, basically. So pick your favorite here, PYF, probably Arcana or Investigation, I would think. And then keep in mind that thanks to multi-classing with Artificer, yes, we do have second level spell slots now, just as though we had taken 3 levels in Wizard from the get-go, right, which is nice. No second level spells yet, of course, but still, it's important to remember where we're at with our slots. At level 4, we would be a Wizard 3, and that means we get our subclass, and honestly, there are quite a few that would work well here. Bladesinger, of course, for some additional defense primarily, but I don't love having to use our bonus action on this build especially to get that blade song going. Eventually, anyways, I'm going to want to be using that bonus action as often as I can, so I think I'm going to pass on my darling baby this time. Diviner would work great, as always, to get you a couple of predetermined d20 rolls every day that you can use offensively or defensively, potentially. Maybe especially it would be good here to help ensure that a spell attack hits or an important saving throw is failed, sure. But I think my personal favorite for this build, is Abjurer. I love Abjurers, especially if I'm trying to make a wizard tank build like this one right up there that I think Nox might be playing in a D&D game that he's about to start. But yeah, that extra tankiness from Abjurer is really going to come in handy for us today. So at this level, we get 2 Abjuration features. Abjuration Savant is really good now, right? All of these Savant features are. It lets us choose 2 wizard spells from the Abjuration School of level 2 or lower right now and learn them for free. And then whenever we gain access to another level of wizard spells, we can learn 1 more Abjuration spell for free. Sweet. At this level, I'd probably go Arcane Vigor for a little self-heal using our hit dice, and Elminster's Infusion. New from Heroes of Faerun, this spell requires concentration, but only takes a bonus action to cast and gives us advantage on our saves against spells and magical effects, and has us taking 0 damage against those things if we succeed on our save instead of half damage. It's kind of like evasion, right? It's not great control, but in a magic-heavy fight, it would be pretty great to have. The real reason we are here in Abjuration, though, is for the Arcane Ward feature, which says that when we cast an Abjuration spell with a spell slot, we can simultaneously create an Arcane Ward that acts as a buffer of hit points. It has a maximum number of hit points equal to twice our wizard level plus our intelligence modifier, so 9 for now. When we take damage, the ward takes damage first, even, yes, before temporary hit points, right? And if we have resistance, that applies to the ward. Also, we can refill those hit points of the ward by casting more Abjuration spells throughout the day. For every level of the Abjuration spell that we cast, the ward regains twice that many hit points. Or, we can just use a bonus action now to consume a spell slot and do the same thing. So yeah, this is a nice buff to our survivability, which will be especially important for us in a couple of levels. Now, we do get second level spells here, and there are some additional non-abjuration survivability options that I'd love to have, like Blur to give enemies disadvantage on attacks against us. That requires concentration, but Mirror Image doesn't, and it creates illusory duplicates of ourselves that enemies might hit instead of us. And then there are some more solid control options too. Rhymes Binding Ice is a fun way to potentially deal damage and stop enemies from moving. Suggestion can make one enemy, at least, just go home to save their dying family member, or whatever other suggestion you might put in their head. Hold Person can paralyze a humanoid, and of course, Web can potentially restrain multiple enemies. At level 5, we would be a Wizard 4. That means we get our first general feat, and yeah, I think we gotta go Warcaster. It bumps our intelligence to 18, it lets us cast a spell as an opportunity attack, and above all, gives us advantage on our concentration checks. Together with Constitution save proficiency that we have, right, our concentration checks are very, very solid, and that feels nice. Don't forget, we do have 3rd level spell slots now at this level. At level 6, we would be a Wizard 5, and the only thing that we get at this level are 3rd level spells. What a rip. Just kidding. Best level ever. So yeah, Counterspell and Dispel Magic are the obvious Abjuration picks, I think. And beyond that, we'd want to focus on the amazing Control trifecta, right? Fear to send multiple enemies running, Hypnotic Pattern to incapacitate multiple enemies, and my favorite, Slow, to just really debilitate multiple enemies. Good for our team's offense and defense. I especially like the fact that Slow lowers the enemy's armor class by 2, because we are definitely going to be making attacks thanks to Selune's Viper that we can finally grab at this level above all. We talked about it a bit in the preamble already, but let's just get into the details of the spell here since it does a lot. First up, yes, we cast it as a bonus action and it lasts for a whole hour but doesn't require concentration. Nice. It gives us 15 temporary hit points, and that number scales by 5 more for every level we upcast it. Remember, the spell ends early if we have no temporary hit points left, but that wording is very important. It definitely does not say that when these specific temporary hit points run out, the spell ends early. Like it says, for example, with the temporary hit points you get from Spore's Druid's symbiotic entity that we built around a couple of weeks ago with that Cavern Brawler build, right? This means that, sure, if your temporary hit points are running low from the spell, right, but they're not totally gone, well, we could cast, say, False Life on ourselves, and though temporary hit points don't stack, if you get another source of them, you take the higher amount, right? And yeah, there's definitely a build for this spell where you are multiclassing Druid with Twilight Cleric for just like a billion never-ending temporary hit points, but we all know Twilight Cleric's broken. I can't in good conscience use that subclass. Anyways, right, this is why I keep saying how important it is to get our armor class up and have that arcane ward topped off and, use the shield spell, etc., etc. Because our control largely depends on holding on to these temporary hit points. And honestly, I think that's a really fun mechanic. It's a super powerful spell, but with a potential weakness that might force you to think and play and build a little differently, right? Okay, in addition to the temporary hit points, we also get a climbing speed here. Feels a little random, but I won't complain. Snakes can climb, I guess. Not really sheer surfaces, but whatever. But then the main feature is the Venomous Bite. While this spell is active, we can use a magic action to make a ranged spell attack with a range of 50 feet, not bad. And if we hit, the target takes 1d6 force damage and then has the poisoned condition until the start of our next turn. Now, that alone is pretty solid. Poisoned enemies make attacks and ability checks with disadvantage, but that doesn't matter much here because while poisoned by that attack, they are incapacitated. And that is phenomenal, since incapacitated means they can't take actions, bonus actions, or reactions, can't speak, and their concentration is broken. Basically, all they can do now is move. And we can just use our action every round to keep incapacitating the enemy of our choice, so long as we hit them. And they aren't immune to the poisoned condition. Again, no saving throw here. So good. So, at level 6, let's do a little, not damage report, but control report, shall we? Let's talk tactics. On round 1 here, I think we're going to want to start off with our best and most appropriate, concentration-based control spell. Like I say, I'd probably favor slow most of the time, since I think it's fun to let the enemy still do a little something, but just be kind of worse in every way. Keeps it interesting for the DM and for the other players, but feel free to go with Hypnotic Pattern or Fear if you're not someone who likes to play with their food, I guess.
Are you just fiddling around with me or what?
Anyways, on subsequent rounds, if you don't already have Selune's Viper up, it does last for an hour, remember, so you might, but you can cast it with a bonus action and then use your action to simply target your favorite or least favorite, I guess, enemy. Maybe one of those who made their save against Hypnotic Pattern or whatever, or who wasn't in the area of effect, right? To, incapacitate them. Ideally, you'll be able to make that Selune's Viper attack with advantage thanks to your familiar, but that is going to depend on your table and whether or not enemies are throwing out familiar killing AoEs and things, right? But yeah, after that, you just keep incapacitating, trying to stay safe, buffing your arcane ward with shield or absorb elements, or sure, just with your bonus action if need be, and continuing to incapacitate over and over. Make sure you laugh at your hapless opponents every round too, of course. Laughing is a free action. Don't forget, while Selune's Viper is active, using your action to incapacitate is not the same thing as casting a spell. So you could definitely use your bonus action to Misty Step or cast Arcane Vigor, which would also happily refill your ward, right? With Selune on your side, you are indeed a goddess among mortals. And it's only going to get better from here. Because at level 7, with our main tactics in place, it is time to expand our control potential with, you guessed it, a little more multiclassing. I want to take some sorcerer levels now, and I bet a lot of you can guess why. So yes, we would be a sorcerer 1 at this level, meaning that we get innate sorcery first up, and in my script I just have a little sad face emoji next to innate sorcery. This feature is amazing for those of us with a good charisma score and lots of sorcerer spells, but for us, not so much. It lets us use a bonus action to buff our sorcerer spells, specifically giving us advantage on attacks with them and raising our DC for them by 1, but yeah, alas, Selune's Viper is not a sorcerer spell. Probably for the best, that would be OP. Let's move on. We also get sorcerer spells here, yeah, and cantrips. And I'm honestly just going to say PYF here, but remember to focus on things that just work, right? Since our charisma is low. Grab any rituals you missed from level 1 wizard before. Cantrips that you wanted but weren't quite able to get, right? Don't forget, we do get a 4th level spell slot here thanks to multiclassing. At level 8, we would be a sorcerer too, and this is the main reason we're here, right? Because we now get Font of Magic, yes, our sorcery points, which we have just 2 of per day as a sorcerer too, but don't forget, we can cannibalize our spell slots for more sorcery points, and it doesn't even take a bonus action anymore, which is a good thing, because I think we just might want to do that a lot on this build, since we use those points to fuel our meta magic, right? Which we also get now at sorcerer too, and boy, are there a ton of meta magic options that I would love to have, but none more than my favorite Quicken Spell. Quicken Spell lets us cast a spell that normally takes an action as a bonus action. And now we are cooking with gas. Quicken Spell costs 2 sorcery points, so it's not cheap, but man, is it worth it. As for the other meta magic options to pick here, I mean, yeah, I want them all. Twin Spell might be at the top of the list so that we could upcast Command to affect more targets without having to spend a higher spell slot for it. If it weren't for the fact that you can't use 2 meta magic options on the same spell, generally, and we'd be wanting to quicken command most of the time that we used it, right? Instead, I'd probably more likely consider like subtle spell to cast something without being noticed, maybe letting us get a powerful spell going before combat started. Careful spell would be great to let us cast like hypnotic pattern or another AoE control spell, but so that it doesn't affect our allies, right? If they're standing in the middle of a group of enemies that we want to cast it over, yeah. Seeking Spell might be nice for Saloon's Viper, letting us re-roll a missed spell attack. I think that's probably my favorite of all of them for this build, but any of those are good choices. So again, good luck picking. At level 9, with Quicken Spell secure, we just go back to Wizard, right? Well, not so fast. I mean, of course you could. Maybe you should even, but if we weren't able to take Mark of Warding Dwarf or Levistus Tiefling for our species, yeah, I think I might just dip my toe into the Warlock waters here first. Don't be mad. So, yeah, let's see. What is going on with this character? They got sick of all that book learning. They're going through a rebellious phase. Something outside of their arcane studies seemed to be granting them additional power. At first they thought it was something in their blood, hence the sorcerer levels, but it turns out it's an otherworldly being enticing them, tempting them with a greater ability to control and bolster their own defenses if they'll just sign on the dotted line. I don't know, you tell me. Or don't take a warlock dip, but I am, meaning yes, I would be a warlock 1 here so that I could get a single eldritch invocation, first of all, and our options for that are pretty limited here, but I think Pact of the Tome would be maybe my go-to. You know, as someone who has a fancy pants spellbook already filled with lots of rituals, hopefully your DM would let your like wizard spellbook double as the Book of Shadows from this invocation. Or maybe you just have 2 fancy pants spellbooks now, I guess, you bibliophile. Regardless, the Pact lets us learn 3 cantrips and 2 ritual spells from any spell list. And that just makes us the most versatile caster ever. You would seriously have 17 cantrips known right now. 4 from Wizard, 4 from Sorcerer, 2 from Magic Initiate Cleric, 2 from Warlock, and 3 from Pact of the Tome. You never saw a cantrip you didn't like. Feel free to go Pact of the Chain if you'd rather have a free Invisible Familiar instead, or something else, sure, but I really like being like the cantrip and ritual master. So much utility here. But the main reason that we are here in Warlock, of course, is because we would get 1st level Warlock spells now, and that means we could pick up, yes, Armor of Agathis. Is it really worth taking a whole level for just 1 single spell? I think so on this build. Honestly, it synergizes so well with what we're trying to do. Hear me out. We cast Armor of Agathis as a bonus action. Perfect. It's an abjuration spell, so it refills our arcane ward. Perfect. And it gives 5 temporary hit points per spell level that we cast it at, meaning that it is super easy to use this to refill both our ward and our temporary hit points to keep Saloon's Viper going if need be. It even returns cold damage to melee attackers if they need additional discouragement from trying to hurt us. Again, if you can get this spell from your species, or sure, from one of the Ravnica backgrounds or something, right, then go for it. But assuming that you can't, I think it's worth the dip on this build. Feel free to ignore it if you disagree. But at level 9, it is time for our next control report. Since last check, our control and survivability have seen some nice gains. First up, I'm going to assume that when combat starts, we've got Selune's Viper going already. Again, since it lasts an hour, right? If so, then yeah, right on round 1, we could use a bonus action to quicken our best concentration-based spell, and then use our action to incapacitate an enemy with the Viper. After that, we could use our bonus action either to cast Armor of Agathis to refill our arcane ward and our temporary hit points, or, if we didn't need to, quicken the command spell. So just picture the battlefield now. Let's say we're fighting like 4 wyverns. That's a deadly encounter for a party of 4 at this level. You start out combat casting Hypnotic Pattern, sure. Or sure, slow on all of them, since they all have multi-attack. That's a nice way to reduce their potential damage and make them easier to hit. Let's say 2 of them fail their save against slow and 2 of them succeed. On one of those that succeeded, you use your action to incapacitate them, leaving just a single non-controlled target for your party to focus down. On round 2, let's say that one is still somehow alive. No worries. You incapacitate the same target as last time with your action, and you quicken command on the last one to force it to flee. It's probably standing next to a melee ally or 2 of yours, so they get opportunity attacks. If that doesn't finish it off, well, it's gone for a round or 2. So now your allies can focus down one of the original enemies that got slowed or hypnotic patterned, or even the one that you've been incapacitating. From there on, you just rinse and repeat. You're basically already in cleanup mode right from the get-go. And yeah, if the dice aren't rolling your way, well, hey, you've got a lot of extra health from your arcane ward and your temporary hit points, assuming that enemies can even hit you in the first place with your 19 AC, higher if you have a magic armor and or a shield, and the shield spell. This is just a really potent build that will have you doing lots of stuff every round, but will also let your allies shine as they are burning down the enemies. It's so fun. Muy poderoso. So, where do we go from here? Back to Wizard, of course. Duh. Yeah, we want more spell slots, better spells, and a more potent arcane ward, and some handy abjuration features too. We have delayed our main class too long, surely. So yeah, we put our otherworldly patron on hold, such a tease, and we go back to our books, meaning that we would be a Wizard 6 here at level 10, and as an abjurer, that means we get projected ward. This is a fantastic support move. It lets us use our reaction to cause our arcane ward to absorb damage for an ally that gets hit, if we want to be super selfless. What a wizard. Don't forget, we do get a 5th level spell slot now, thanks to multi-classing. At level 11, we'd be a Wizard 7, and that means we get 4th level spells. I would say Backlash and Banishment would both be incredible abjuration spells for us to potentially pick up here. Backlash lets you use a reaction to reduce incoming damage by 4d6, so a great option if the shield or absorb element spells aren't going to get the job done, right? But then it also returns that same amount of damage to the damage dealer if they were within 60 feet, barring a Constitution save. But yeah, I mean, reducing the damage and simultaneously refilling our arcane ward is kind of right? And now we can do that like with shield if that would keep us from getting hit in the first place, or absorb elements if it was like a fire or cold attack or whatever, or this if none of those things applied. As for banishment, I'm kind of surprised that banishment's an abjuration spell, honestly. It requires concentration, so you probably wouldn't be using it unless you were fighting creatures from another plane of existence, in which case you just shunt them back to that plane permanently if they fail their save, right? And if you can hold on to concentration for a minute. Other than that, though, sure, polymorph is a nice control option, or a fun way to turn your ally into a T-Rex, but the most important spell for me at this level, I think it would actually be Greater Invisibility. Now, it requires concentration, so that's a bummer, but again, hear me out. One of the best things about Selune's Viper, as we've said, is that it incapacitates so long as you land your attack, right? And they're not immune to poison. For that reason, I really want to have advantage on my attacks. Now, a lot of us would be able to get that from our familiar, but some tables play pretty strict with familiars, having them go on their own turn, right? They roll their own initiative. That might not be right before you, yeah? And when they take the help action, it just grants advantage on the next attack made against the enemy that your familiar is specifically like distracting, right? That's rules as written. So if that's how your table plays it, first off, I would go human for your species and grab the lucky origin feat too, for some on-demand advantage. But also, at this level, consider concentrating on greater invisibility, since it allows us to cast spells and make attacks without breaking invisibility, meaning we would have advantage on attacks against most enemies, and they would have disadvantage on attacks against us. Depending on the fight, right? Whether or not I use this spell, of course, would depend on the fight. If there are a ton of enemies and you'd all be better off with just like a mass shutdown concentration spell, yeah, go for it. But if there are only 1 or 2 or maybe even 3, you could quicken greater invisibility at the start of combat and then incapacitate 1 via Salune's Viper, and you'd be more likely to succeed on that if you had advantage on the attack, right? And then on subsequent rounds, you'd keep using Viper with your action and then quicken command on the other enemies, upcasting it if need be. And that should really be all you need to keep shutting down the battlefield super effectively while staying super safe yourself. I love the idea of like an invisible controller that the enemy can't see and they're just like terrorizing the battlefield. But nobody knows what the source of all of this mayhem is, right? It's awesome. Anyways. At level 12, we would be a Wizard 8, and that means we get another general feat. I think we got to bump intelligence here, cap it at 20. We put that off for way too long with all that silly multiclassing. Yeah, we really got to get our spell DC and our spell hit chance up as high as possible, plus it even bolsters our Arcane Ward a little bit. Don't forget, we get a 6th level spell slot here now thanks to multiclassing. At level 13, we would be a Wizard 9, and that means we get 5th level spells. The abjuration picks here would be Illustrial's Mooncloak, I think, which gives you and your allies within 20 feet half cover, so that's a +2 to AC, and resistance to cold, lightning, and radiant damage, and also lets you heal or succeed on a failed, frightened, grappled, or restrained saving throw. But either of those things would cause the spell to end. Still, a nice defensive, like party-wide move that'll fill up your temporary hit points if you need it, at the cost of your concentration, yeah. A Circle of Power is probably the other good choice here for Abjuration to just give you and your allies within 30 feet advantage on saves against spells and magic. And again, no damage instead of half if you succeed on the save, right? This also requires concentration, so kind of a bummer, but yeah, both of them situationally useful. Beyond this, though, I mean, Synaptic Static is just a fun, big area damage and debuff delight. Bigby's Hand, Dominate Person, and especially Hold Monster are great control options, but I mean, Wall of Force. One of the best control spells in the game to just trap enemies that can't teleport and don't have the Disintegrate spell behind an invisible force field. No save, game over. All right, at level 13, it is time for our next control report, but there's honestly not a ton to report on. We've just greatly increased our potential via more spell slots and better spells, as well as capped our intelligence modifier for a better hit chance and save DC. I guess we might be concentrating on greater invisibility now for fantastic defense and easy advantage on our Salune's Viper attacks, again, depending on the fight. And we've even picked up some support capability, but yeah. We're just locking everything down now and probably barely getting scratched while we're at it. So what does it look like in the end game? Well, at level 14, we would be a Wizard 10, and as an Abjurer, we get Spellbreaker. This really ups our anti-mage game, right? It says that we always have Counterspell and Dispel Magic prepared, potentially freeing up some spell preparations. That's nice. But also that we can cast Dispel Magic as a bonus action. Awesome, save us some sorcery points if we need them, and refill our Arcane Ward when we cast it, right? And then also with Dispel Magic here, we can add our proficiency bonus to the ability check to see if it dispels the thing, yeah? Finally, neither spell, a Counterspell nor Dispel Magic, actually expends a spell slot if it fails to work for us. But, I mean, does that mean it wouldn't refill our Arcane Ward in that case? Arcane Ward says we have to cast a spell with a spell slot for it to refill the ward's hit points. Technically, I'm thinking no. But I can see an argument that we cast the spell with a spell slot, we just got the spell slot back or something. I don't know, work that out with your DM. Hopefully you won't even really need to worry about it much. Don't forget, we get a 7th level spell slot at this level thanks to multi-classing. At level 15, we would be a Wizard 11. And that means 6th level wizard spells now. Contingency, I think, is just the no-brainer abjuration pick here. It lets us set up something like, when I say the word marzipan, cast Selune's Viper on myself at the 5th level, or something like that, so that you can just have it going right on round 1 if you didn't otherwise, right? Or, sure, you could do that to re-up the casting of Selune's Viper if you lose the temporary hit points in a really tough fight or something, and not have to spend your bonus action to get it going. Now I'm wondering, does anyone have like a funny story of a time at their table where somebody had like a special keyword that was going to trigger contingency and their DM like tricked them into saying that word when the player wasn't really thinking about it and then like accidentally triggered their contingency spell? Someone's got to have a story. I don't know, the DM like constantly filling every tavern with little marzipan treats or something. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Anyways, Fizzban's Platinum Shield might be worth considering here too. It requires concentration, so that's a bummer, but it gives half cover, elemental damage resistance, and evasion. And you can move the buff around as a bonus action to like a different party member. I don't know, it's cool, but maybe not something you'd use all that often since it requires our concentration, especially considering all of the, things we can do to bolster our defense. Otherwise, as for 6th level spells here, yeah, you gotta grab Mass Suggestion. Concentration free, mass, like everyone leave the battlefield for this funny and creative reason that I'm putting into your head, power. It's so good. And I love that as an Abjurer, we can get both contingency and Mass Suggestion here. That's amazing. At level 16, we would be a Wizard 12, and we get another feat. And I would probably use it to either bump Constitution to 16 for like health and saving throw benefits, or maybe take Resilient Wisdom, since we started as an Artificer, right? We don't have saving throw proficiency for Wisdom. But I would also seriously consider taking Metamagic Adept here, if you had access to it. It would give us 2 more Metamagic options and 2 more sorcery points. It's not a no-brainer, but yeah, Metamagic is option, and there were a lot of Metamagic options that I wanted to have. Don't forget, we get an 8th level spell slot here at this level. Thank you, multiclassing. But finally for us, at level 17, we would be a Wizard 13, and that means we get 7th level wizard spells, and Symbol is the only abjuration option here, I think, and it can be fun, letting you like set a trap for enemies, basically, that you're sure will be passing along the way, or, to protect an area, etc. It does take a minute to cast, though, so not really something we'd be using in combat. Otherwise, for control, I think you gotta go with reverse gravity at this level to just make everyone in a huge area fly up to the ceiling, where you can, as always, point and laugh at them. Silly monsters. But this then brings us to our final control report. And, just like last time, no real change in our tactics here, just more survivability, loads more spell slots, and powerful control and defensive spell options to be the best Cobra commander that you could ever be. So, all right, let's get into some final thoughts on this one, shall we? I mean, there's no tier score to report on since there's no damage done nor tanky damage taken, but I don't think that stops this build from, like I said at the beginning, probably being the strongest build I've done to date. I mean, the shutdown power here is just off the charts. And combined with how much raw survivability it has, too, not to mention all the other utility and, sure, AoE damage when you need it in a mostly full caster, full wizard build, right? I mean, imagine being in a boss fight against, I don't know, an ancient red dragon, or maybe like an animal lord. They both have legendary resistances, sure, but neither are immune to the poisoned condition. As long as you can hit them, which, admittedly is not a guarantee, but with advantage, you've got a really solid chance, they are just incapacitated. They can't even use their legendary actions. And in a fight with lots of enemies, it's hard to imagine that there would be too many fights where you just wouldn't be able to literally shut down, like, every enemy on the battlefield. Between your Viper, your AoE concentration spells, and using Command, potentially upcast as a bonus action, those poor baddies are not going to stand a chance. And in fact, this might be the biggest downside to the build, right? It might be too good. Not that, you won't miss attacks sometimes and enemies won't make their saving throws, etc. It's not just an automatic win button, but a lot of the time it might be. The potential to just shut down every enemy is massive here. Or it has the potential to feel that way, at least. And yeah, my biggest concern is that your DM might get so frustrated with your capability to control the battlefield that suddenly every enemy you fight is immune to the poisoned condition, and fear, and charmed, and incapacitated for that matter, right? That's actually one of the main reasons why I think you probably should rely on slow as your go-to control spell here for concentration. A few years ago, Treant Monk put out a really great video on why it's a bad idea for DMs to do things to just totally shut their players down. I'll link it here if I can find it. His argument there was basically, D&D is for having fun, and not being able to do anything with your character isn't fun. I happen to totally agree with him, and also, while shutting down some of the DM's monsters in a fight might not ruin the fun for your DM, shutting down all of them, like all of the time, might, And it's important for the DM to have fun too. And at least with the slow spell, you're just severely hampering them, but they can still do stuff. Move, albeit more slowly, attack, though maybe just once instead of multiple times, right? Cast spells, maybe, and just be like a little easier to hit otherwise. It might make for a nice compromise between you and your DM to let you put a solid debuff on most enemies and then hard shut down one or two of them between Salune's Viper and Command like we've been building for here, right? A tenuous piece that still lets you flex a ton of control power, but doesn't run the risk of ruining the fun for your DM and making them feel like they have to just bring monsters and tactics to every fight that are intentionally meant to counter you and your build, right? Because that's not fun either. But yeah, if you can find that happy place between being incredibly powerful but not game-breakingly so, man, this build would be a lot of fun to play. Incredible control, fantastic survivability, off-the-charts utility, and I mean, they even have Cure Wounds for solid healing. My favorite part about it, though, might be that though it's incredibly powerful, it's not a spotlight hog, right? Kind of like a good tank or support build. You make your team a lot more successful, but in the end, they still get to be the ones killing the baddies. You're setting up the pins and they're knocking them down. And as long as you are in the party, ain't no pin around that won't be falling, sooner or later. So that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure had a giddy good time building it. I also hope you know that I love you. Thank you for all that you do for me and for this channel. It means so much to me, and I'm really grateful for you. I hope that you have a really great day and a fantastic week, and if you don't, I really, really, really hope that you will not give up. Please hang in there, all right? I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. It's G.I. Joe against Cobra and Destro, fighting to save the day. He never gives up, he's always there, fighting for freedom over land and air. G.I. Joe, a real American hero. G.I. Joe's there. Militarizing American children since the 80s. Yeah, it feels a little problematic in hindsight. But I loved that show so much. I watched every episode. I bought every toy that my 8-year-old budget could get. And somehow I still turned into a tree-hugging, peace-loving hippie. So, I don't know. Pros of... You could potentially be doing other things or potentially sleep, but nobody knows what. You could potentially be casting spells you could potentially be casting your